in the lobby of a billion-dollar glass skyscraper in Manhattan, when an 8-year-old boy wearing a tattered jacket and with muddy stains all over his shoes broke through 3 layers of security and stood his ground in front of the cold-hearted real estate tycoon. Everyone gasped. The boy didn't cry or make a fuss. He simply held out his hands, which were purple with cold, and offered a worn wooden pony. In a voice without a trace of tremor, he said,
"I'm betting this on you. I'll come here every day after school to sweep the building for you for as many years as it takes. Please don't tear down my grandpa's shop."
The tycoon was about to signal his security guards to drag the boy away, but when his gaze fell upon a peculiar engraving on the base of the wooden carving, he froze in place as if struck by lightning. In that single second of hesitation, the cold-blooded billionaire vanished, replaced by a man whose memories, sealed away for 30 years, had been awakened. His subsequent actions not only halted a multi-billion-dollar development project, but also exposed a treacherous betrayal, ultimately restoring to him the thing he had longed for most in life, yet believed he had lost forever. The story you are about to witness is fictional, yet sometimes the deepest truths are found precisely in tales that never truly happened.
"Take your hands off him,"
I said. My voice wasn't loud, but the air in the lobby, which had been thick with tension, instantly turned to ice. The 2 security guards who had been preparing to drag the boy out let go as if they'd been electrocuted. I didn't look at them. My gaze was fixed on the boy's hands, which had turned purple from the cold. Or rather, on that small wooden horse. The crooked, carved into the base, was like a rusty knife piercing precisely into the depths of my memories, sealed away for 30 years.
"Mr. Vance,"
Chief Operating Officer Victor said, striding up behind me. He raised his wrist to glance at his $1 million paddock, Philippe.
"The board is still waiting for you. The $300 million Central District acquisition can't be delayed because of some low-net-worth street urchin who popped up out of nowhere."
Victor's tone carried his usual nauseating elitist arrogance. I still paid him no mind. I slowly crouched down. The hem of my expensive custom-tailored suit pants scraped a crease into the floor tiles. This was the first time in 20 years I had bent my knees in front of a stranger.
"What's your name?"
I stared into the boy's eyes. They were sharp and fearless, a quality rarely seen even in adults.
"Leo."
The boy's voice was slightly hoarse, but remarkably steady.
"Who gave you this?"
I pointed at the wooden carving.
"My grandfather.
Leo pushed the carving forward. He didn't flinch.
His name is Arthur. He's a carpenter. His shop is at 13 Central Street. Your bulldozers are going to flatten it tomorrow."
My heart clenched when I heard the name Arthur. 30 years. I'd assumed the old man who'd given me a bowl of hot soup on that blizzard-filled night and taught me to carve had long since vanished from this cruel world.
"Mr. Vance."
Victor's voice rose a few notches. He motioned to the security guard.
"Get this little beggar out of here. Clean the lobby immediately. The stench from him is contaminating our air circulation system."
I stood up. I turned my head and looked at Victor.
"Aaron."
I called softly. My personal assistant, Erin, immediately stepped forward from the crowd, her expression as calm as water.
"Yes, Mr. Vance."
"Cancel this morning's board meeting."
I said,
"Shut down all the bulldozers working on the Central District demolition project."
Victor's eyes widened in shock, as if he'd heard the most absurd joke.
"Julian, have you lost your mind?
He'd even forgotten to use my title.
That's $300 million in sunk costs for some old vagrant's ramshackle wooden shack. This defies all corporate strategic logic."
I smoothed my cuffs.
"My decisions don't require a logical explanation to you, Victor."
I turned my gaze back to Leo. The boy was still holding up the wood carving, his eyes set with determination.
"You just said you wanted to trade this for it."
I asked him.
"Right.
Leo nodded.
Equivalent exchange. I looked up the hourly wage for janitors in your building. If I sweep for 3 hours a day until I'm an adult, it'll be enough to cover the rent on that plot of land."
I looked at his slender shoulders and the old jacket that was clearly a size too big. He was only 8 years old, yet he had already learned to protect the only thing he had using the cruelest rules of business.
"Aaron, get the car ready."
I didn't take the wood carving.
"Where are we going, sir?"
Erin asked.
13 Central Street.
I said. Victor suddenly stepped in front of me, his face ashen.
"I will not allow you to make such an emotional, idiotic decision. The company's interest cannot be held hostage by your sympathy."
I looked at him, my gaze as cold as a knife's edge.
"Move aside."
Victor clenched his teeth, staring at me intently. 2 seconds later, he relented and stepped aside to make way. I walked up to Leo.
"Take your wood carving and come with me."
The boy didn't move.
"Didn't you promise not to take it apart?"
He asked stubbornly.
"Get in the car."
I said,
"Take me to see your grandfather."
Leo hesitated, then carefully stuffed the wood carving back into his pocket. He followed me out through the revolving glass doors. Outside, a blizzard was raging across New York, but inside me, a fire ignited one I hadn't felt in 30 years. Chapter 2. The Maybach glided smoothly through the blizzard. The cabin was heated to the max, but Leo was still shivering slightly. He pressed himself tightly against the door, trying to keep the muddy water from staining the expensive leather seats.
This car costs more than our whole workshop, doesn't it?
He said suddenly.
It does.
I didn't deny it.
Then why are you coming with me?
He turned his head and stared at me.
I don't believe rich people are actually kind. They say on television that you only pretend to be good when you need to dodge taxes.
I looked at this 8-year-old boy. His guard was up like a hedgehog's quills, and every word he spoke carried a wariness beyond his years.
You don't have to believe me.
I said calmly.
You just need to know that I'm going to verify something right now.
The car pulled up at 13 Central Street. This was one of Manhattan's most dilapidated corners. The surrounding buildings had been torn down, leaving only a solitary woodworking shop standing. The roof was drafty, and the windows were patched with torn newspapers. A bulldozer stood less than 10 meters away, like a steel behemoth ready to devour its prey at any moment. I opened the car door and stepped into the muddy snow. Leo immediately jumped out and ran ahead to push open the rickety wooden door.
Grandpa, I'm back.
The workshop was unlit and the light was dim. The air was thick with the musty scent of sawdust and the pungent smell of cheap disinfectant. By the stove in the corner, a hunched figure was laboriously stuffing tools into a cardboard box.
Leo,
The old man's voice was hoarse and weary.
where have you been? I've been looking everywhere for you.
The old man turned around. His face was etched with deep furrows, his eyes cloudy and almost unfocused. His hands were severely deformed, his fingers swollen, and even holding a light wooden file caused them to tremble violently. It was Arthur. 30 years had passed, and time had nearly destroyed him completely, but that gentle yet resilient aura about him remained unchanged.
Grandpa, I went to see their boss.
Leo ran over and took the old man's hand.
He agreed to come take a look.
Arthur froze. He strained to open his cloudy eyes, trying to make out my figure standing in the doorway.
Sir,
Arthur's voice trembled slightly.
I'm sorry this child is inconsiderate and disturbed you. We'll be moving out first thing tomorrow morning. We won't hold up your construction work.
As he spoke, he tried to shield Leo behind him. That humble posture felt like a needle piercing my eyes with pain. 30 years ago, he wasn't like this. 30 years ago, he was a man of principle who dared to slam his fist on the table in front of the police to bail out a homeless teenager caught stealing bread.
Where are you moving to?
I asked, my voice hoarse. Arthur gave a wry smile.
There's a shelter in Brooklyn. They still have beds available. As long as Leo has a warm place to sleep, this old man can go anywhere.
Leo jerked his head up.
You lied to me. You said we were going on vacation.
The boy's eyes reddened, but he bit his lip hard, refusing to let the tears fall.
You said that shelter had a big garden and endless barbecue.
Arthur trembled as he ruffled the boy's hair.
I'm sorry, kid. Grandpa's no good. I can't protect our home anymore.
I stood in the shadows, watching the grandfather and grandson. It felt as though something inside my chest was shattering. Just then, my phone in my pocket vibrated. It was Victor. I pressed the answer button.
Julian, I've run a background check on that old man.
Victor's voice carried a tone of self-congratulatory excitement.
Not only is he a bankrupt carpenter, but he also has severe rheumatic heart disease and arthritis. He doesn't have long to live. All it'll take is a little legal pressure, and he'll be out of here in no time. You don't need to waste your time on trash like that.
As I listened to the voice on the phone, my gaze fell on Arthur's trembling hands.
Victor,
I said, softly,
Yes, Mr. Vance.
if you ever dare to call him trash again,
my tone was as calm as a still lake.
I'll knock every single one of your teeth out with my own hands and shove them down your throat.
The line went dead instantly. I hung up the phone. I strode forward, snatched the cardboard box from Arthur's hands, and threw it to the floor.
Sir, what are you?
Arthur took a terrified step back.
Don't bother cleaning up.
I stared at him.
This dump is indeed unfit for human habitation.
I turned to look toward the door.
Aaron,
Aaron appeared at the doorway like a ghost.
have the medical team stand by at my penthouse. Arrange for the best rheumatologists and ophthalmologists. I need to see them tonight.
Arthur was completely stunned.
Sir, what are you saying we can't afford?
I didn't give him a chance to refuse. I grabbed Arthur's deformed wrist with a grip so tight he couldn't resist.
You have no choice, old man. Now come with me.
Chapter 3. My penthouse is located in the most expensive part of Manhattan. Overlooking Central Park, it features floor-to-ceiling windows and a heated pool. Every inch of marble here exudes the cold, stinging scent of money. Leo stood at the edge of the wool rug in the entryway, the mud on his shoes already dried and caked. He stared intently at his feet, not moving an inch.
Take off your shoes.
I slipped off my coat and handed it to Aaron.
If I get this carpet dirty, how much will I have to pay?
Leo looked up, his eyes brimming with suspicion.
Would a day's pay from sweeping the building even cover a single hair?
I stopped in my tracks.
You don't have to pay.
I said.
That goes against the principle of fair exchange.
Leo insisted, standing his ground.
If you don't let me work, you're just giving me charity. Grandpa said we don't accept handouts.
I looked at his stubborn face and saw myself from 30 years ago. That teenager who, like a stray dog, bared his teeth at the whole world. Fine. I pointed to the huge floor-to-ceiling window in the living room.
That glass is a bit dusty. You're in charge of cleaning it tomorrow. $50 an hour deducted from your debt.
Leo's eyes lit up. He quickly took off his tattered shoes and stepped barefoot onto the carpet. Arthur was taken directly to the guest room by the medical team. Top specialists were conducting a comprehensive physical examination on him. I sat on the leather sofa in the living room and rubbed the bridge of my nose. The elevator doors dinged open. Victor strode in, holding a blue folder. He didn't take off his shoes, and his expensive leather shoes left deep imprints on the carpet.
Julian, you're out of your mind.
He slammed the folder down on my coffee table.
You brought a homeless old man suspected of having a contagious disease and a little mongrel of unknown origin back to your private residence. Do you have any idea how the company's stock price would plummet if the media caught wind of this?
I leaned back against the sofa, staring at him coldly.
Take off your shoes.
Victor froze for a moment.
What?
I told you to take off your shoes.
I repeated, my voice low and measured.
You're ruining my carpet.
Victor's face flushed alternately red and white. He clenched his jaw, refusing to take off his shoes, and instead pointed at the folder on the table.
I'm not here to discuss your carpet. I looked into that boy named Leo.
A malicious smirk curled the corners of his mouth.
He doesn't have any legal identification. Arthur never went through any formal adoption procedures. Legally speaking, that boy is an undocumented minor.
I narrowed my eyes slightly.
What are you trying to say?
I'm saying that you're currently harboring a minor without legal guardianship.
Victor braced his hands on the coffee table and leaned forward.
I've already consulted with the legal department. All I have to do is make one phone call to Child Protective Services, CPS, and they'll take that kid away immediately. As for the old man, he'll be sent to a public nursing home to wait for death. That way, the Central District project can move forward smoothly. Julian, I'm helping you clear up potential liabilities on your balance sheet.
I looked at Victor's face, twisted with calculation. Suddenly, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This was the chief operating officer I had personally promoted, a monster completely alienated by capital.
Victor,
I said, rising slowly to my feet. I was half a head taller than him, looking down on him from above.
why do you think I'm sitting in this chair?
Victor furrowed his brow.
Because you're cold-blooded enough, rational enough.
Wrong?
I cut him off.
Because I know better than anyone what money can't buy.
I picked up the folder on the desk and right in front of him, tore it into pieces bit by bit. Snow white shreds fell like snowflakes onto his expensive leather shoes.
That project, I'm putting it on hold indefinitely. As for Leo and Arthur, they'll stay here until I die.
Victor's face contorted completely.
You'll be impeached by the board.
He growled.
Are you going to ruin the company for two worthless pieces of trash?
I'll prove it to you, Victor.
I threw the last scrap of paper in his face.
Acting on emotion has never been a liability, but your self-righteous stupidity certainly is.
Victor glared at me, his chest heaving violently. He turned and strode toward the elevator, leaving behind a vicious curse.
You'll regret this, Julian.
The elevator doors closed. I turned and saw Leo standing at the corner of the hallway. He was holding a rag, clearly on his way to clean the windows. He'd heard every word of our conversation.
Is he going to kick us out?
Leo asked softly. He can't. I walked over and ruffled his hair.
Go to sleep. You can clean them tomorrow.
Leo didn't move. He looked at me with a sadness in his eyes that belied his age.
If I don't clean the windows, will you no longer need me?
My hand froze midair. Those words struck me like a hammer pounding heavily against my chest. Chapter 4. The next morning, I had to go to the office to deal with the ripple effects of the Central District project stalling. The old men on the board were like sharks smelling blood swarming around me in the conference room. I quelled them with an iron fist. But it took me a full 4 hours. When I stepped out of the conference room, Aaron looked absolutely horrified. She hurried toward me, clutching her phone tightly.
Mr. Vance, something's happened.
Her voice trembled slightly, a rare occurrence.
Child Protective Services CPS just raided the penthouse.
My mind went blank for a split second.
What did you say?
Victor leaked the story to the media.
Aaron reported the situation quickly.
He claimed you're mentally unstable and illegally detaining a child without legal status. CPS came with police, armed with an emergency search warrant, and forced their way in. Mr. Arthur suffered a heart attack from the shock and has already been taken away by an ambulance. Leo, they took him away.
I said nothing. I turned and headed for the elevator. My pace was so fast, I was practically running. My mind was racing, but inside my chest, it felt like a ball of molten lava was churning. When I rushed back to the penthouse, the front door was wide open. The living room was a mess. The coffee table had been overturned, and the rag Leo used to clean the windows lay on the floor. Several uniformed CPS workers were taking notes. Victor stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, holding a glass of my whiskey. He watched me walk in, a victorious smile curving his lips.
You're late, Julian.
He raised his glass in a phony toast.
I merely cleaned up the junk on your balance sheet. You don't need to thank me.
I didn't look at him. I walked straight up to the female official in charge of taking notes.
Who gave you the authority to barge into my private residence without my permission?
My voice was as cold as ice, without a hint of emotion. The female official was momentarily intimidated by my presence, but she steeled herself and produced a document.
Mr. Vance, we received a formal named complaint. This child lacks legal status and Mr. Arthur Hayes has been deemed unfit to provide care. Under the Child Protection Act, we must take him into custody and place him in foster care. It's for the child's own safety.
Safety?
I scoffed.
You're forcibly dragging him away from his only family member, and you tell me it's for his safety?
Mr. Vance, please calm down.
The female official said, taking a step back.
We're just following procedure.
I turned my head to look at Victor. He was still holding his glass, looking completely unconcerned.
Do you think you've won?
I asked him.
I'm just doing what a QO is supposed to do,
Victor shrugged.
cutting my losses. That old man might not make it through the night in the hospital. That little bastard will be sent to a public welfare home without even heating. And you, Julian, you'll still be that billionaire sitting high above it all. It's for the best, isn't it?
I walked up to him. Intense rage coursed through me, eventually settling into a chilling calm. I didn't hit him. I didn't even raise my voice.
Aaron.
I called softly. Aaron stood in the doorway.
Notify legal, freeze Victor Larkin's options and shares in Vance Group immediately.
Victor's smile froze on his face.
You're crazy. You don't have the authority to do this.
Not only do I have the authority,
I said, looking him in the eye.
but I'm also going to press charges against you for industrial espionage and embezzlement. I'll hire the best legal team in all of New York. I'll audit every single expense you've claimed from the company over the past decade. I'll not only bankrupt you, but I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life in a federal prison.
The glass in Victor's hand slipped from his grasp, shattering on the carpet as whiskey spilled across the floor.
You're going to ruin me over some random kid?
He roared in disbelief.
He's not some random kid.
I bent down and picked up the abandoned wooden pony from the carpet. The carved A on its base stood out starkly under the light.
He's my family.
I stood up, clutching the wooden figure tightly in my hand.
Get out of my house, Victor, while you can still walk on your own.
Chapter 5. The hospital corridor was filled with the pungent smell of disinfectant. Arthur lay in the intensive care unit, his body covered in tubes. The heart monitor emitted a monotonous, faint beep. I stood outside the glass window, watching the man who had once been as towering as a mountain, now as fragile as a withered leaf, ready to shatter at any moment.
What did the doctor say?
I asked Aaron behind me.
Acute heart failure.
Aaron said in a low voice.
The medical team has stabilized his condition, but his body is too weak. Subconsciously, he's resisting treatment. The doctor said he seems to have lost his will to live.
I closed my eyes. I knew that feeling all too well. When something you fought tooth and nail to protect is snatched away from you, living becomes a torment. Look into it, I said, opening my eyes, my gaze hard and cold.
Find out exactly which foster home CPS sent Leo to. I want all the information on the director of that facility within 20 minutes.
Understood.
Aaron turned and left. 2 hours later, my car pulled up in front of a drab building in the Bronx, St. Mary's Children's Home. The iron gate was rusted, the plaster peeling from the walls, and the yard overgrown with weeds. This was the place Victor had called for the children's safety. When I pushed open the door to the director's office, the pot-bellied director was sitting with his feet up on his desk, trimming his toenails.
Who are you? Don't you know how to knock?
He bellowed impatiently. I didn't say a word. Aaron stepped forward and placed a business card on his desk. The director glanced at it, and his expression changed instantly. He hurriedly took his feet down and stood up, the chair scraping noisily across the floor.
Vance, Mr. Vance, I didn't realize you were here. What brings you here?
Where's Leo?
I asked bluntly. The director froze for a moment.
You mean the boy CPS brought in this morning? That's against the rules, Mr. Vance. You're not his legal guardian. You're not allowed to visit.
I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down.
I hear this orphanage has a $500,000 government grant up for approval next month.
I looked at him, my tone calm.
And the committee member in charge of the review happens to be a playing partner of mine at the golf club.
Beads of sweat began to form on the director's forehead.
Mr. Vance, are you threatening me?
Number. I leaned forward slightly.
I'm informing you, if I don't see that child within 5 minutes, this orphanage will be shut down indefinitely tomorrow for failing to meet fire safety standards.
The director swallowed hard. He grabbed the phone on the desk, his hand shaking so much he could barely hit the buttons.
Bring the new boy, Leo, to the visiting room now.
5 minutes later, I met Leo in a cold, windowless room. He was wearing an extremely thin gray uniform. There was a distinct bruise on his face. Clearly, he'd been bullied by the other children as soon as he arrived. But he wasn't crying. He was holding a tattered rag, vigorously scrubbing the only metal table in the room. Hearing the door open, he stopped and turned his head. The moment he saw me, a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes, but it quickly faded.
What are you doing here?
He lowered his head and continued wiping the table.
You don't need to wipe the glass here.
I walked over to him and took his hand. His hand was bone-chillingly cold.
Who hit you?
I looked at the bruise on his face.
I fell by accident.
He stubbornly pulled his hand away.
Just go. They say you're crazy and that grandpa's a fraud. They say I'll have to live here from now on. You don't have to pretend to be a good person anymore.
I looked at him. That long-suppressed ache suddenly burst through the dam of reason. I knelt on one knee on the cold concrete floor, bringing myself to eye level with him.
I wasn't pretending.
I said, I pulled the little wooden horse out of my pocket and placed it on the table. Leo's eyes widened instantly.
You didn't throw it away?
How could I throw it away?
I pointed to the letter A on the base.
30 years ago, on a blizzard night even colder than today, a homeless teenager nearly beaten to death by the police for stealing bread was saved by a carpenter. The carpenter gave him hot soup and taught him how to carve wood. The carpenter told him that no matter how rotten the wood, if you carve it with care, it can become something useful.
Leo stared at me blankly, as if struggling to process these words.
That carpenter carved an A on the base, standing for his name, Arthur.
I looked into Leo's eyes and spoke slowly, enunciating each word.
That homeless boy, that was me.
Leo's lips began to tremble slightly. He finally let go of the rag he was holding.
You're the one who stole the bread?
Yes.
I nodded.
So I'm not giving you charity, Leo. I'm paying back a debt, an equal exchange. Do you understand?
Leo looked at me, his eyes finally reddening. He suddenly threw himself into my arms, his hands clutching the collar of my coat tightly.
Grandpa got sick. They took him away.
He finally let out a sob just like a real 8-year-old.
I know.
I held him close, my voice low and firm.
I'll take you home, I swear.
Chapter 6. After leaving the orphanage, I went straight back to the company. The entire 38th floor executive suite was deathly quiet. Everyone knew the news that Victor had been forcibly removed by security. I pushed open the office door. The 3 top family law attorneys in all of New York were already sitting on the sofa, waiting.
Mr. Vance,
Lead attorney David stood up.
the situation is not looking good.
He pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses, his tone extremely grave.
Victor Larkin's counterattack has been fierce. He's colluded with certain officials within CPS and filed for an emergency restraining order with the court. Not only have they barred you from contacting Leo, but they've also submitted a so-called psychological evaluation report to the media.
David handed me a document.
They claim that due to your history of homelessness in your youth, you suffer from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. They're trying to prove that taking Leo home was a form of pathological psychological compensation. You are completely unfit to serve as a guardian.
I flipped through the report, which was filled with lies, and let out a cold laugh.
Victor has really gone to great lengths to destroy me.
But that's not the worst of it.
David took a deep breath.
They've obtained Mr. Arthur's complete medical records. Since Mr. Arthur could pass away at any moment and there are no legal adoption proceedings in place, it's highly likely that at tomorrow's hearing, the court will directly rule to permanently strip you of custody and place Leo in the state foster care system. Once the ruling takes effect, you'll never be able to intervene again.
The office fell into dead silence. Aaron stood to the side, looking at me with concern. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and gazed down at the gray, hazy city below. 30 years ago, this city tried to devour me. 30 years later, it's trying to devour the people I care about.
David,
I didn't turn around.
Yes, Mr. Vance.
draft a petition for lifetime support and joint custody. I'm putting up all my personal assets, including this building, as collateral.
David gasped.
Mr. Vance, that's too risky. If the court finds you mentally unfit, your assets will be frozen.
Do as I say.
I turned around, my gaze leaving no room for argument.
Also, I'll take the stand myself tomorrow.
But
No buts.
I cut him off.
Go prepare.
After the lawyers left, I sat alone in my office for a long time. My phone screen lit up. It was a call from the hospital. Arthur had woken up. I rushed to the hospital immediately. In the intensive care unit, Arthur lay with an oxygen mask on, his eyes open but weak. When he saw me walk in, his gaze was filled with anxiety and pleading. He tried to raise his hand, but he had no strength left. I walked to the bedside and took his misshapen hand in mine.
Leo, where's Leo?
His voice was so faint through the oxygen mask, it was barely audible.
He's safe.
I said softly.
I promise you, he'll be back with you soon.
A cloudy tear slid down the corner of Arthur's eye.
Sir, you're a good man, but you can't fight them. My old life isn't worth much. Don't ruin your career because of us.
I looked at him. 30 years later, he was still that same kind-hearted old man who would rather suffer himself than burden others. I took the wooden horse figurine out of my pocket and placed it by his pillow. Arthur's gaze fell on the figurine, and his pupils suddenly contracted.
This is
Arthur,
I leaned down and looked into his eyes.
that blizzard night 30 years ago. That bowl of soup you gave me, it was tomato and beef. Even though there was only a tiny piece of beef in it,
Arthur's body began to shake violently. He stared intently at my face, as if trying to peer through the marks of time to find the shadow of his past self.
Julian,
He gasped in disbelief.
that kid who stole the bread.
it's me.
I clasped his hand.
You bailed me out back then and gave me a chance to start over. This time, it's my turn.
I watched his heartbeat gradually stabilize on the monitor.
Live well, Arthur. Tomorrow, I'll win our home back.
Chapter 7, Friday, 9 a.m. Manhattan Family Court. The hearing room was packed to capacity. Victor had summoned a swarm of media, their cameras and microphones trained on the courthouse entrance. He stood beside the plaintiff's bench in a crisp, tailored suit, a smug, sickening smile of certainty plastered across his face. As I walked into the courtroom, a sea of camera flashes erupted. Ignoring the bloodthirsty reporters, I strode straight to the defendant's bench. Victor's lawyer, a man known for his ruthlessness and unscrupulousness, was the first to speak.
Your Honor,
The lawyer stood up, his voice booming.
the facts of this case are crystal clear. The defendant, Mr. Julian Vance, attempted to use his vast wealth to illegally exert control over an undocumented minor. We have ample evidence indicating that Mr. Vance's mental state is extremely unstable.
He pulled out a document and waved it in the air.
He once openly halted a development project worth hundreds of millions of dollars for the sake of these two unrelated individuals from the lower classes. This is clearly an irrational, pathological act of psychological compensation, and that old man named Arthur could die in his sickbed at any moment. Handing the child over to them would be like throwing him into the fire.
A murmur rippled through the gallery. Victor looked at me smugly and mouthed.
You're going to lose.
The judge frowned and turned to me.
Mr. Vance, the plaintiff's allegations are very serious. Does your attorney have anything to say in your defense?
David stood up, about to speak, but I pressed my hand against his shoulder. I stood up.
Your Honor, I request to speak on my own behalf.
The courtroom fell instantly silent. The judge hesitated for a moment, then nodded.
Granted.
I stepped out of the defendant's dock and walked to the center of the courtroom. I didn't look at Victor, nor did I look at the media. I took the wooden horse figurine out of my pocket.
The plaintiff's attorney just said that I made an irrational decision for the sake of two unrelated people.
I held up the figurine.
I'd like to tell a story. 30 years ago, during the coldest winter this city has ever seen, a 15-year-old boy driven by hunger stole a loaf of bread from a convenience store. The store owner broke his ribs and threw him out onto the street in the middle of a blizzard. If no one had intervened, he would have frozen to death that night or been sent to a juvenile detention center, ruining his life forever.
The courtroom fell completely silent. Everyone was captivated by this unexpected story.
But one person did intervene.
My voice was steady, yet carried a power that pierced the heart.
A carpenter he'd never met before took out his food money for the next 2 weeks and posted bail for the boy. He brought the boy back to his drafty workshop and gave him a bowl of hot soup. He didn't lecture him or look down on him. He simply gave the boy a piece of wood and a carving knife, telling him, no matter how rotten the wood, if you carve it with care, it can become a masterpiece.
I looked at the judge.
That carpenter's name was Arthur Hayes. That boy was me.
A wave of stifled gas rippled through the gallery. Victor's face turned pale in an instant. He jumped to his feet.
Objection. This is irrelevant to the case. He's using a sentimental story to divert attention.
Objection overruled.
The judge shot Victor a cold glance.
Mr. Vance, please continue.
I turned around and looked Victor straight in the eye.
The plaintiffs claim that I halted the development project because I was mentally unstable, but they don't understand. In this world, there are things whose value cannot be measured by a balance sheet. Arthur didn't have legal adoption papers, but he protected that child with his life. Leo didn't have legal status, but he was willing to trade a lifetime of labor for his grandfather's right to live. They aren't some lowly scum. They are the last remnants of dignity and kindness in this cold, heartless city.
I strode back to the defendant's bench and picked up the documents David had prepared.
Your Honor,
I handed the documents to the court clerk.
this is a legally binding application for lifelong support and joint custody. I, Julian Vance, pledge all my personal assets, equity, and my creditworthiness as collateral. I will share the responsibility of raising Leo with Arthur Hayes. If the court deems Arthur's physical condition unsuitable for sole custody, then I will become Leo's legal guardian.
I looked at the judge, my gaze unwavering.
I will not let anyone take my family away from me.
Chapter 8. A minute-long silence fell over the courtroom. Even the reporters who usually love to jump to conclusions put down their cameras. Everyone's gaze was fixed on that document, using assets worth tens of billions of dollars to guarantee custody of an 8-year-old street child. This was unprecedented in the history of New York's judiciary. Victor's lawyer panicked. He frantically flipped through the legal text on the table, trying to find a loophole.
Your Honor, this is a violation of procedure.
He stammered.
Mr. Vance has no blood relation to this child and his psychiatric evaluation.
Enough.
The judge struck the gavel, cutting him off. The judge put on his reading glasses and carefully reviewed the documents I had submitted. Time ticked by second. Beads of sweat formed on Victor's forehead. He glared at me, his eyes filled with venom and fear. He knew that if this petition were approved, all his schemes would come to nothing. Not only that, but he would also face my thunderous retaliation.
Mr. Vance,
The judge finally looked up.
the legal validity of this document is beyond reproach, but as a judge, I must confirm the child's true wishes.
The judge looked toward the back of the gallery.
Bring the child in.
The side door of the courtroom swung open. 2 CPS workers led Leo inside. He was still wearing that thin gray uniform, but the bruises on his face had faded somewhat. He walked into the courtroom, his eyes darting quickly through the crowd. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up instantly. Ignoring the staff's attempts to stop him, he ran straight toward me.
You didn't lie to me.
He said, standing before me and looking up at me.
You really came to get me.
I crouched down and ruffled his hair.
I promised you a fair exchange.
The judge watched the scene, his expression softening considerably.
Leo,
The judge said, gently.
would you like to live with this Mr. Vance and your grandfather?
Leo turned and looked up at the judge seated high above. His voice wasn't loud, but it was exceptionally clear.
He's someone my grandfather saved. He said we're family. I'm willing to sweep his building for the rest of my life, as long as he doesn't kick us out.
In the gallery, several female reporters could no longer hold back their tears. The judge took a deep breath. He removed his reading glasses and picked up the gavel.
The court hereby rules the plaintiff's motion to terminate Arthur Hayes' parental rights is denied. The joint custody application filed by Mr. Julian Vance and Mr. Arthur Hayes is granted. Effective immediately, Leo Hayes shall officially become the legal ward of Mr. Julian Vance.
Thud. The gavel fell, sealing the verdict. The courtroom erupted in enthusiastic applause. Victor slumped in his chair as if all the strength had been drained from him. His lawyer was frantically packing his briefcase, trying to escape this place that had ruined his reputation as quickly as possible. I stood up and shot Victor a cold glance.
Aaron,
I said softly.
Yes.
Aaron had appeared behind me without my noticing.
Notify the legal department to submit the case against Victor to the FBI. I want him in handcuffs before the sun sets today.
Understood.
A faint smile touched the corners of Aaron's lips. I took Leo's hand.
Let's go.
I said.
Where?
Leo clutched my hand tightly.
To the hospital to pick up Grandpa. Then we'll go home.
As we walked out the courthouse doors, the snow had stopped. Winter's sunlight pierced through the clouds, bathing the streets of Manhattan. Though it was still cold, there was a hint of warmth in the air. Leo looked up at the Vance Group skyscraper towering into the clouds.
Do I start cleaning windows tomorrow?
He asked with a straight face. I couldn't help but laugh. It was the first time in 30 years that I had truly laughed.
No,
I said.
Tomorrow, you're going to school. As for the windows, that's my job.
Chapter 9. Over the next few months, events unfolded with overwhelming force. Victor Lacken was formally arrested by the FBI on charges of serious embezzlement and commercial fraud. As he was led out of the Vance Group building in handcuffs, the media's camera flashes nearly blinded him. He tried to shout at the cameras, claiming he'd been framed, but no one paid him any attention. His cherished elite status crumbled like a house of cards in the face of irrefutable evidence. In the end, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison and stripped of all his ill-gotten gains. As for those old men who had once ganged up on me in the boardroom, after witnessing my thunderous response, they all obediently shut their mouths. They finally understood that this lion, whom they had deemed emotional, still possessed the power to tear them to shreds at any moment. Arthur spent 2 full months in the hospital. Under the meticulous care of a top-tier medical team, his condition miraculously improved. Although his hands were still unable to perform delicate woodwork, at least they no longer trembled violently. On the day of his discharge, I drove there personally to pick him up. When I parked the car in the Central District, Arthur froze. The dilapidated woodworking shop had been torn down. In its place stood a brand new building that retained the original red brick aesthetic. A wooden plaque hung above the entrance. Carved in bold, vigorous lettering were the words, Arthur's House Community Woodworking and Art Center.
This is.
Arthur's lips trembled and his eyes instantly welled up with tears.
The Central District Development Project is still moving forward.
I said, helping him out of the car.
But this site has been designated a permanent preservation zone. I've converted it into an art center specifically to provide free woodworking and art classes for underprivileged children like Leo. Arthur, you're the honorary principal here.
Arthur wept bitterly. He clutched my hand tightly, unable to form a complete sentence.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you.
It's a fair trade, old man.
I patted the back of his hand and whispered. That evening, we held a small celebratory dinner in the penthouse. No media, no business partners, just me, Arthur, Leo, and Aaron. Aaron had deliberately swapped out her stiff business suit for a soft cashmere sweater. She was in the kitchen helping Arthur carve the roast. Leo was sprawled on the living room carpet, holding a small carving knife, intently carving something into a piece of wood. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, holding a glass of red wine. I looked down upon this city, a place I once hated with a passion, yet longed to conquer.
What are you looking at?
Arthur walked over to me and handed me a plate of sliced roast meat.
I'm looking at those lights.
I said, taking the plate.
I used to think those lights were cold because behind every window there was no one waiting for me.
Arthur smiled gently.
Now there is.
He turned his head to watch Leo, who was intently carving.
That boy is even more stubborn than you were back then.
Yeah,
I took a sip of wine.
but he's luckier than I was. He didn't have to wander in a blizzard for 30 years to find his way home.
Leo suddenly scrambled up from the carpet and ran over to us.
It's done.
He held out his palm. It was a very rough wooden figurine, a crooked suit, a cold expression, and something resembling a folder in his hand.
That's you.
Leo said, pointing at the carving with a serious expression.
Even though you won't let me clean the building anymore, I'm still going to pay you rent. Consider this my interest for this month.
I looked at the ugly wooden figure and couldn't help but laugh. I took it carefully and placed it on the most prominent display cabinet in the living room, right next to the little wooden horse carved with the letter A.
It's a fair deal.
I said, Chapter 10. Before I knew it, the start of winter had arrived. Manhattan welcomed its first snowfall of the year. Snowflakes like shredded cotton drifted down onto the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. Inside, the fireplace blazed brightly, crackling softly. I sat on the sofa, holding a document outlining the next quarter's operating budget for Arthur's house. This had once been nothing more than a sunk cost in Victor's eyes. But now, it had become the Vance Group's most cherished charitable initiative. Every day, Dozens of children from impoverished neighborhoods came there to learn carpentry. Although Arthur can no longer work with his hands, he always sits in his wheelchair, wearing reading glasses, and smiles as he guides the children. He looks so much better than he did 6 months ago. That lifeless, fading aura has been replaced by a calm sense of contentment.
Julian,
Arthur's voice interrupted my thoughts. He was sitting in a rocking chair by the fireplace holding a cup of hot tea.
don't forget Leo's parent-teacher conference tomorrow.
I won't forget.
I set down my files.
Erin has cleared her entire schedule for tomorrow morning.
I can't believe it.
Arthur shook his head and chuckled.
The chairman of the Vance Group, of all people, is actually going to an elementary school to get lectured by a teacher. I heard he got into a fight at school.
It wasn't really a fight.
I corrected him.
That chubby kid from the upper grades made fun of his jacket for being too old. So Leo just applied the principle of equivalent exchange and tossed his backpack into the sink.
That kid,
Arthur sighed, though there was no reproach in his tone.
he's just like you.
Is that a compliment?
I raised an eyebrow.
I suppose so.
Arthur said, taking a sip of tea.
At least he knows how to stand up for himself.
The sound of a door opening came from the entryway. Leo ran in, backpack on his back, carrying a chill with him. He'd grown quite a bit taller than he was 6 months ago and was wearing a well-fitting down jacket. But he still kept that habit scrubbing the snow and slush off the soles of his shoes on the mat before coming inside.
I'm home.
He shouted.
Go wash your hands and get ready for dinner.
Arthur said with a smile. Leo tossed his backpack onto the sofa and came over to me. He pulled a carving knife and a palm-sized piece of wood out of his pocket.
I still can't carve that line you taught me yesterday.
He handed me the wood.
Show me again.
I took the wood and the knife. It had been 30 years since I touched these tools. My technique had long since grown rusty, but I didn't refuse. Holding the carving knife, I carefully traced a curved line along the grain of the wood.
Keep your wrist steady. Don't use brute force.
I said softly.
You have to feel the grain of the wood and go with it, not force it.
Leo leaned over the arm of the sofa, watching intently.
Is that how you handle those old guys on the board of directors?
He asked suddenly. I paused for a moment, then chuckled.
Pretty much. But wood is a lot more honest than they are.
I handed him the carved piece of wood.
Go practice on your own.
Leo took the wood and nodded with satisfaction.
Once I get the hang of it, I'm going to carve a big house.
Why?
I asked.
Because it's too high up here.
Leo said, glancing out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city.
When Grandpa gets too old to walk, I'm going to carve him a single-story house with a yard. That way, he can soak up the sun every day.
I watched his serious profile. An indescribable warmth welled up in my chest. I had spent half my life building countless skyscrapers in this city. I thought those colossal structures built of steel and glass were the very reason for my existence. I thought that standing at the very top would keep the cold at bay, but I was wrong. It wasn't until that 8-year-old boy handed me that worn wooden pony on that muddy morning and stood with his hands frozen purple, blocking my bulldozer, that I truly understood no matter how tall a building is, it's just a cold structure. But a home is a place where someone is waiting for you inside.
Go wash your hands.
I said, ruffling his hair.
Erin made beef and tomato soup today.
Are there big chunks of beef?
Leo's eyes lit up.
Big chunks.
I said with a smile.
Enough to fill you up.
Leo let out a cheer and ran toward the bathroom. I leaned back on the sofa, watching the dancing flames in the fireplace. Outside the window, New York's blizzard was still raging. But in this room, everything was as warm as spring. I closed my eyes. That cold night 30 years ago finally came to a complete end in this moment. I was home.